This position is not good. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಇದನ್ನು ನೋಡ್ತೀವಲ್ಲ. So this looks very good. ಹಿಂಗೆ ನೋಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿರ್ತೀವಿ ನಾವು. No, you have to look at the camera. No. Sometimes we look at there and speak. So
my wife also told camera is in front, why you are looking
ಕ್ಯಾಮ್ರಾಗಳೇ ಒಂಥರ ಇದೆ.
ಹಲೋ. 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 ಸರ್ ಯಾವಾಗ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಿ? 4:50ಕ್ಕೆ ಸರ್. ಫೀಡ್ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ ಲಿಂಕ್ ಇವತ್ತು ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಸೆಷನ್ ಕಳಿಸ್ತೀರಾ ಸರ್? ಅಥವಾ ನಮ್ಮ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಗ್ರೂಪಿಗೆ ಹಾಕ್ತೀರಾ ಸರ್? ಸರ್ ಹೌದು ಸರ್, ಓಕೆ ಸರ್, ಓಕೆ. ಸರಿ ಸರ್, ಸರಿ ಸರ್.
ಸರ್ ಅದು ಇನ್ನು 5:25 ಇದೆ ಸರ್.
5:25 ಇದೆಯಾ? ನಂದು
ಇದು ಟೋಟಲ್ ಸೆಷನ್ನೇ ಸರ್.
ಹೌದೇನಾ?
5:25 ಈಗ
4:50 ಅಂದ್ರಲ್ಲ.
ಸರ್ 5:20.
ಹೌದಾ? ಓಕೆ ಫೈನ್, ನೋ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್. ಆಗಲಿ. ಮಹೇಂದ್ರ ಹೇಗಿದ್ದೀರಾ?
ಸರ್ ಗುಡ್ ಸರ್.
ಗುಡ್.
ಒಂದ್ಸಲ ಅವರು ವಾಯ್ಸ್ ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ಹಿ ಇಸ್ ದೇರ್ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಒನ್. ಹೋಗಿ ಒಂದ್ಸಲ ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ಆಡಿಯೋ ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡಿ.
ಇಲ್ಲ, ಎಷ್ಟು ಗಂಟೆಗೆ ಶುರು ಮಾಡೋದು? ಕೆನಡಾದಲ್ಲಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಈಗ ಅವರು?
ಕ್ಯಾನಡಾದಲ್ಲಿ
ಕೆನಡಾ.
ಮೊದಲು ಪೂರಾ ಇಂಡಿಯಾದ್ದು ಆಕ್ಸ್ಫರ್ಡ್ ಯೂನಿವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಸೀನಿಯರ್ ಸೈಬರ್
Good evening, all dear participants. We will start the last session of the 3 days international webinar in few minutes. And good evening, Shashi sir. Dr. Shashi sir, can you hear me? Shashi sir, am I audible? ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಆಗಿದೆ. Shashi sir, am I audible, Shashi sir?
You are not audible ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ.
Shashi sir, am I audible? Dr. Shashi Kumar. ಅವ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಯಾರೋ ಫೋನ್ ಇದ್ರೆ ನಂಬರ್ ಇದ್ರೆ ಮಾತಾಡು. ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಆನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಬಟ್ ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅವರು. ಮಾತಾಡಿ. Dr. Shashi, Dr. Shashi Kumar, sir, can you respond? I think he has muted it and gone somewhere.
5:20 ಇಲ್ಲ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ.
Dear participants, we would be starting very soon. Please mute your audio and wait for us to start the session.
ಇವ್ರು ಕನೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಬೇಕಲ್ಲ ಹೆಂಗೆ 20 ಮಿನಿಟ್ಸ್ ಏನಾದರೆ ಇಟ್ಟು ಅವರು
ಹೇಳೋದಾಗಲ್ಲ. ಸರ್ ಇವ್ರಿಗೆ ಶಶಿಯವ್ರಿಗೆ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರಲ್ವಾ ಇದು ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಇವ್ರು ಸರ್ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾರಂತ.
ಒಂದು ಹಾಫ್ ಆನ್ ಅವರ್ ಮುಂಚೆನೇ
ಓಕೆ.
ಎರಡು ಮೂರು ಮೆಸೇಜ್ ಕಳಿಸಿಲ್ಲ ಐ ರಿಸೀವ್ಡ್ ಆಲ್ ದ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಷನ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಲೆಟ್ ಯು ಜಾಯಿನ್.
ಅಲ್ಲ ಇವರು ಸರ್ ಮಾತಾಡೋದು ಹೇಳಿದಾರಲ್ವಾ,
ಅವ್ರಿಗೇನು ಹೇಳಿಲ್ಲ.
ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ಏನೇನೋ ಕಮಿಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್ಗಳು, ದೇ ವಿಲ್ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ದೇರ್ ಪ್ರಿಯರ್ ಕಮಿಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್. ಸೊ ಇಫ್
ಇಷ್ಟು ಅರ್ಲಿ ಮಾರ್ನಿಂಗ್ ಏನು ಕಮಿಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್
we can't say.
Morning he is an Indian.
I can understand.
ಸರ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗಿಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆ ಸರ್. One more time, just unmute and ask him to rejoin.
ಯಾರಿಗೆ? ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಶಶಿಕುಮಾರ್, am I audible?
Please unmute your mic and speak.
He's not there.
Muted.
Hello, Dr. Shashikumar. Can you respond to us? ಬಹುಶಃ
To unmute the video.
Shivam has just come. We'll see him for a while.
If Shashikumar won't join, we will request Shivam to speak some German translations. This Ahmed Navid losing
No, he is very
very
consistent.
consistently from first day.
Yeah. I think we should give some award to sir. Best participant.
In the T certificate, we will give that grade A plus, A plus plus, only A. Who joined today only we will give C. According to your
Latecomer award. Who joined the first? We will give him best debut award. Today morning, one Dr. Nagarjun MD unmuted himself and was saying something. No?
once Provisi College was speaking. Donor sir unmuted. He was in journey. In jeep, the people are discussing using some bad words. ಹಸಿವಾಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ರಿ ಅಂತ ವಿನೋದ್ mute 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 mute. It is very risky.
Very risky. So some months back, what happened in Brazil, sir, that the president of Brazil, he was holding a video conference
But here also I have seen some ladies they kept on and they are working in the kitchen.
तो घर जाके मैंने बताया we were trying to please me.
Mute your only. Indirectly, Mangalam told Mahendra.
हाँ सर.
I request some of the participants who are unmuted.
Hello.
Yeah, 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 Mahendra. We just
Good evening, Shashi sir.
ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ ಹೇಳಿ.
ಓ ವಾವ್. ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ ಸರ್. ಅದೇ ಇದು ಆಡಿಯೋ ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ನಾನು ಇದು ಮಾಡಿದೆ. ಆರ್ ವಿ ಕ್ಲಿಯರ್ ಸರ್? ಆರ್ ವಿ ಆಡಿಬಲ್?
ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಿದೆಯಾ ನಿಮಗೆ?
ಹಾಂ 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 ಎಸ್ ಕ್ಲಿಯರ್ ಇದೆ. ಸರ್ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ವಿ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ನಾ? ಸರ್ ಶುರು ಮಾಡೋಣವಾ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಶಶಿ ಸರ್? ವಿಡಿಯೋ ಏನು?
ಇನ್ನು 5 ಗಂಟೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ?
5:30.
Sir,
5:20 we'll start.
your talk will start at 5:20, sir. Before that, we have some formality. Professor H. M. Maheshwari, sir, Honorable VC, would give valedictory remarks for few minutes. Sir, am I audible? ಶಶಿ ಸರ್
ಹಾ, ಯಾ
ಕೇಳಿಸಿದೆಯಾ? ಅಲ್ಲ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ಇದೆ.
ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಿದೆ ಹೇಳಿ.
ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ಇದೆ.
ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಯಾವ ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ಅವರು?
ಸರ್ ಮೆಜಾರಿಟಿ ಆರ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಲಿಟ್ರೇಚರ್, ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷ್, ಕನ್ನಡ ಮತ್ತು ಲ್ಯಾಂಗ್ವೇಜಸ್ ಅವರಿದ್ದಾರೆ.
ಕನ್ನಡ ಸ್ಪೀಕರ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇದಾರಾ?
ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಸರ್. ಐ ಮೀನ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿ
ಹೌದಾ?
ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಎಮ್ ಎ ಮಾಡ್ತಿರೋರು ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಜಾಯ್ನ್ ಆಗ್ತಾರೆ. ಇದು ಆಲ್ ಓವರ್ ಇಂಡಿಯಾ ಇದೆ. ಮತ್ತು ದೇರ್ ಆರ್ ಫ್ಯೂ
ಹ್ಮ್
ಪಾರ್ಟಿಸಿಪೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಇಂಟರ್ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಐ ಮೀನ್ ಅದರ್ ಕಂಟ್ರೀಸ್
ಹ್ಮ್
ಆಲ್ಸೋ.
ಹ್ಮ್
ಹಾಂ ಸೊ
Mr. Mallikarjan, will you please unmute your video? Dr. Mallikarjan, sir.
ಶುರು ಮಾಡೋಣವಾ?
हाँ sir. Just
Good evening, one and all. It's indeed a pleasure to see you all on the last session of the 3 days international webinar on thinking translations, exploring dialogues across disciplines. It's a matter of pride to share with all the participants that the Prasaranga could invite participants and the speakers from Norway, Canada, Colombia, Bhutan, and a good number of scholars from India. And before starting this particular session, I would like to welcome all the participants to this last session of the 3 days webinar on in thinking translation, exploring dialogues across disciplines. At the outset of this particular session, I would like to extend my warm welcome to Professor H. M. Maheshwari, sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Central University of Karnataka, to this webinar. I extend my welcome to Dr. Sashi Kumar, Research Associate, University of Alberta, Canada, and welcome you, sir. I welcome Professor Vikram Isaji, Coordinator, Prasaranga CUK, and my welcome to all the participants, scholars who have joined from India and abroad to this last session of the webinar. So, at the outset, I would request Professor H.M. Maheshwaraya, sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Central University of Karnataka, for valedictory remarks.
Dr. Shashi Kumar, who is the speaker of this session, he is a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Alberta, Canada, and also Vikram Isaji is the coordinator of this international 3-day seminar, and our Mahendra and Kumar Mangalam, Kiran, and my dear friends, and also the participants who are participating in this webinar. So I am happy as a Vice Chancellor of this university. So my faculty members start the seminar, particularly very relevant, thinking translation, exploring dialogues across the discipline. So our publication house, we call it as Prasaranga in Kannada, is organizing this seminar on August 10th, 11th, 12th. Today is the last day for the seminar. The 3-day international webinar saw some most interesting discussions taken up in the course of discussions at various sessions by eminent translation scholars from various fields of studies. The webinar started with a keynote address on the first day, that is on August 10th, 2020. The keynote speaker, Professor Indrani Mukherjee, who is working at the Center of Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and Latin American Studies, GNU New Delhi. She delivered an excellent keynote address. Professor Indrani Mukherjee talk on thinking translation from the margins had Latin America as its focus, where she dwelt on how societies, particularly the indigenous communities, have suffered worst effort of colonialism, and how they have used their translation strategies to encounter and to undermine these effects. Through her elaborate discussions of the phenomenon of Melichi, is that today is Mexico, Indrani discussed how, in the case of Melinchi, who was an indigenous woman working as a translator and interpreter for the Spanish colony headed by Hernan Corte, translation becomes a tool to deceive the dominant forces. Here, translation is very much a tool of negotiation and survival for those at margins since the early day of colonialism till date. The webinar continued with the second sessions of the first day, where Professor Sundar Sarunki that is the Barefoot Philosopher Collective, and a Professor H.S. Shivprakash, who taught School of Arts at Aesthetics, Jawaharlal Nehru University, gave their talks. Professor Saruki talk on translating concept discussed about the concepts such as secularism and democracy, which even though are widely used in social science debates across the academia in India, are hardly understood well. Professor Saruki stressed that the use of these terms failed to capture the meaning and philosophical debates which have produced these terms in the first place, and have merely contented itself with a translation of these terms only as a labels. Like to accept the terminologies what we define in any language, basically they are defined in the social context. That's very important. The society concept is different. So democracy, the term used in India, is different in the term used in America or in Russia or in any country, because all the words are defined basically on the context. So they are context bound, and also the society is controlling this meaning. Beautifully, the Sarunki has explained the concept of those, the, the terminologies, how they are working in a different manner. Yes, Shivprakash talk culture and translation, a dialogue, stressed translation to be a set of cultural process, not merely a linguistic exercise. He emphasized that translation is a dynamic process and can be seen in terms of interlingual, intralingual, inter and intra-semiotic exercises. He beautifully describes about the semiotic concept, how this inter and intra-semiotic, the phenomenon is working in this translation. The webinar moved to the second day with a very engaging and powerful discussion by the speaker who held the 4 sessions on the day, the 11th, yesterday. The day started with Professor Vanamala Vishwanatha, who teaches at Azim Premji University, Bengaluru. Vanamala talked a translating Indian classic across cultures, touched upon some widely discussed terms and concept of translation pertaining to the classical literature, and gave very insightful perspectives. Her talk invited the participants to rethink the notion of classical literature, where we generally assume to be high culture and superior to the popular folk culture. She emphasized that the classical culture also takes shape from the popular culture spheres. In continuation, she stressed that the translation of a classical, the literature is in Kannada particularly, many additions were made, many changes at basic story level were also introduced, and all these are to accepted as a part of translation process, especially when it comes to classical literature. So beautifully she narrated the problems and perspective of the classical translations in Kannada, and narrated how that can be recreated or something like that. She has given a beautiful narration for that. The session speaker, Dr. Rajio Ushman from a special center of Northeast Studies, JNU, spoke on the topic theater and translation in Manipur. He emphasized that nowadays Northeast India become other to mainstream discourse. As a result, the majority of the translation works of Manipur provided very narrow understanding of its own culture and heritage. But Manipur native indigenous translators doing a good work to represent the rich cultural realities of Northeast Indian in general and Manipur in a particular. The second day, the evening session, Dr. Easterin Kire joined from Norway, who is currently based in Nagaland, recited her poems. After her sessions, Dr. Jelle Lute from the Netherlands, who is currently based in Bhutan, gave his presentation on language, culture, and identity among the highland Nagas, explaining his field of research experiences in Nagaland. He was argued that the translation is a bit difficult job in the field of anthropology, because the interpreter's socio-political background may influences on the data that we are trying to gather. To overcome this problem, we must have a multiple interpreter. He is beautifully narrated. I was very happy to listen his lecture. He said that the language, how the language learning is playing a dynamic role, particularly in the context of translation. If a translator knows that language with a difficulty, he can encounter and he can do a good work. That is the thing. And also we talked about the influences of the interpreter, and how the interpreter takes into this one the political and socio phenomenon equation, also how they can work on that. So that is, he narrated the problem of anthropologists, particularly in translating the text. Because of the interpreter's socio problems, socio political background may influences on the data, that we are trying to gather. So, to overcome this problem, we must have a multiple interpreter. Another major issue in translation in cultural difference. So, he suggested that those who want to work with tribes, they must understand their culture without having any presupposing notion of the native culture, and is also argued that the tribal anthropology must develop within, not from outside. And also he beautifully explained about ethnocentrism, where how this the ethnocentricity is playing a role in particularly translating things, and also he spoke about the concept of interpreter, how they can influence in translation. Beautifully narrated the language and culture and identity among the highland Nagas. The webinar moved into the third day today on 12th August 2020 with two very significant sessions. The first session of the day was delivered by Mrs. Maria Fernanda Castillo, who joined from the Colombia, Latin America. Miss Maria, who has become a quite sensation at young age thanks to her powerful poetry, some of which have also been adapted into theater and photography, shared her views on translation culture across Latin America. She discussed her talk with an extensive references to some very important literary and cultural figures uh, from all over Latin America, and stressed the translation has always been practiced in a multifaceted forms in the region. So that is the last session. We are going to listen now. Dr. Shashi Kumar, who is currently a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Alberta, Canada, is talking on, is delivering a lecture just now on translating and publishing Dalit writings in English. Is to cover aspects of Dalit writings as it get translated and published in English. So I'm very happy as a vice chancellor of this university. I'm very happy. My colleagues, my friends who are working in different departments, particularly the faculty from the foreign languages and faculty from the journalism, mass communication, and also the other faculty members from public administration, Kannada, and English. All they have participated actively. So more than 1,000 participants has registered for this beautiful, the excellent the webinar. I'm happy to say these few words as a vice chancellor of this university. So now I will hand over this mic to my colleague, my friend, Mr. Mahendra. Thank you very much.
Uh, I thank Professor H. M. Maheshwaraya, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Central University of Karnataka, for giving such an elaborative valedictory address. Thank you very much, sir. For the final session of the webinar, we have with us Dr. Shashi Kumar to speak on translating and publishing Dalit writings in English as part of the 3 days international webinar. Before I request Dr. Shashi Kumar, it's my duty to introduce Dr. Shashi to the August gathering. So Dr. Shashi Kumar is a research associate at the Department of English and Film Studies, University of Alberta, Edmonton, Canada. He has worked as the first commissioning editor for translations at the Indian branch, head office of Oxford University Press, New Delhi. He has presented academic papers in some of the best known universities in the world, and he has a number of publications to his credit, both in Kannada and English. He is currently co-editing the volume Critical Discourses in Kannada under the series Critical Discourses in Critical Discourses in South Asia of Routledge. Sir, it's a pleasure to have you in this session. Now I request Dr. Shashi Kumar to speak on the topic translating and publishing Dalit writings in English. Over to Dr. Shashi Kumar, sir.
Thank you. Can you see me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you for the invite. I'm sorry I couldn't attend some of the sessions. This is a final session of the third day, so I don't want to take much time, and I will only talk about like um, 20 to 30 minutes, so we can have more time for discussion. So Dalit writings, I don't know if if Central University of Karnataka have a course on Dalit studies or something like that. And also as a part of English studies, do you teach Dalit writings? I don't know. But it is part across the world now, and not just as a part of mm, English studies, but also as a part of humanities and social sciences and many other disciplines outside these two. So, as my colleague Mahendra has already introduced me, so I have been in this more than an academic. I am also a publishing professional, and I have more than 15 years of professional experience in the field of publishing, both public and private, independent, and as a translator, translation studies scholar, researcher, and a publishing professional. So I'm making use of this experience to take you through this Dalit writings in English, and also I will indulge more in like cultural studies than any other linguistic aspects of translation, and also more from the research point of view. I in some of the sessions I attended, I heard some questions about target language, source language, L1, L2. I am not going to get into that. Please pardon me for that, because you have already been introduced to that. And also in the 21st century, we are moving towards a different realm of translation studies, and from switching from like in the 1990s itself, Tejaswini Niranjana, with her citing translation, had moved to post-colonial studies in translation studies. And now we are like, it's been almost 30 years now. So I think we need to talk about different things. Dalit studies is now like it's a global discipline. So scholars and researchers across the world have been involving in this and engaging in this for quite some time, especially since the past 20 years. And now Columbia University, where Dr. Ambedkar had studied, he did his MA and PhD in the 1910s and 20s. So now they have a chair for this Ambedkar chair called as Ambedkar Initiative, led by Anupama Rao. So this is just to say that how big this has become now. My first job was after my MA. I started off my career with Central Institute of Indian Languages, where I was a translation series of Sahitya Akademi called Katha Bharati, where I had first commissioned Kusuma Bale, a major classic in Kannada literature. So it didn't happen. So it came back to me when I moved to Oxford University Press in 2012. So in between, I had also worked in National Translation Mission. Some of you might have heard about it. It is located in the premises of Central Institute of Indian Languages, and they publish translations of social science, humanities, and natural science texts in 22 major Indian languages. So, and to my surprise, they didn't have any text in Dalit studies. So I don't know if they have included any now, and it's been quite a long time since I left the mission. And at Oxford University Press, I oversaw Indian literature in English translation. It is called as ILET in academic discourse. And I was appointed as the first commissioning editor for translations. And the first work that I took was Kusuma Bale, which, as I told you before, that I had commissioned it for English translation almost 10 years ago. And so you would be surprised to know that that was the first fiction to be translated and published by Oxford University Press. They had published many works in Dalit writings, and it is called as Dalit writings, not Dalit literature. You should be you should note this. And the reason being that it is not just literature, and it is more than literature. And as I told you, that it cuts across discipline. And Dalit writings now is more into this intersectionality, like caste, race, gender, sexuality, and many more. So it's an interdisciplinary area of research, basically. So Oxford University Press has the credentials of having published some of the best known works in Dalit writings. They have published Oxford India anthology in Tamil, Telugu, and Malayalam. Kannada had come to me, but it hasn't happened yet. And it is the only language that hasn't been published published by Oxford University Press. The first work, you might be knowing that it was published in 1992. It is considered as the first work in Dalit writings. It's an edited volume by Arjun Dangle. He himself was associated with Dalit Panthers and all. He's a well-known Dalit writer. So it was only since Dalit Panthers came into existence and influenced Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, and other regions that we are seeing this phenomenon called as Dalit writings. Even before that, we in Marathi we did have Dalit writings, but it hadn't received this status called as Dalit writings. So this is there, and in at OEP I mentioned that Kusuma Bale was the first fiction published, and I put I worked hard to get it published because OEP Oxford University Press only had published works, especially Kannada writers, works of Brahmin authors, if I can call so. If I can call so. Another thing, so this is going to be like, it's not a linear presentation that I'm going to make. I will jump from one to another. So please pay attention to this. And so this Dalit writings, and they have seen multiple volumes, anthologies, and Susi Tharu and K. Satyanarayana, they have published a couple of anthologies on Dalit writings, anthologies of Dalit writings. One was published by Penguin, one by Harper, and one by Navayana. And Navayana was like, it is considered as the first publishing house which undertook exclusively Dalit writings. And it coincided with Zuban, which was into feminist writings. And these are the only two independent publishing houses back then, like almost 20 years ago. It is not even 20 now, but almost 20 years ago. So you can see this from publishing, like public intervention, like Sahitya Academy and National Book Trust kind of public enterprises to private, like private in the sense commercial publishers like Orient, Black Swan, Harper, Penguin, Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, Sage Publications. So there are Hatchet. So you will see hundreds of publishers involved in publishing Dalit writings now, both in Indian languages and English. And India is one of the top 5 largest publishers in the world, which publishes writings in English. This you would be surprised to know. India is one of the top 5. You can even say to an extent it is the top 3. Like US, after US, India is the second country to publish so much in English. So my question would be, so what made the publishers publish Dalit writings in English? Why did they publish it? Why did they start publishing this? That's my first question. And like I said, it moved from public to private, private to independent, and now Dalits themselves have started publishing houses. One is run by my dear friend Yogesh Maitreya. He himself a Dalit poet who writes exclusively in English. So there are some independent publishing houses like that. His publishing house name is Panther Spa. So this public, private, independent, and within independent publishing houses run by Savarnas and publishing houses run by Dalits. So there are 4 categories, you can say. And they are located within India and also across the world. And the first translations, in fact, came out from France. This Narendra Jadav's memoir was published in France first. Then it came to India. So you can also see this trend. So this is how it is. And why this? Why Dalit writings? So the reason is I see that this personal is political, as they say in feminist studies. This is one of the reasons. That's why they choose Dalit autobiographies first. It was not fiction that was published first. It was autobiography. So autobiographies were given importance because personal is political, and personal is political is a famous slogan or an argument in feminist studies. It was introduced by Carol Hanisch way back in 1969, and since then different discourses that had to do with identity have taken up this slogan. So that is one of the reasons why Dalit writings were given importance in India during 1990s, and it is just 30 years, we can say, Dalit writings in English. So now you will also see Dalit's writing in English. As I mentioned, Yogesh Maitreya is one such writer. He writes poetry, and also he contributes columns, and he is a short story writer as well. And there's he is from Maharashtra, and there's one more writer. These are from my generation. One more, Chandramohan Satyanarayana from Kerala. He is also a Dalit poet who writes in English. And you might have also seen two big memoirs published by women like Yashika, that's coming out as Dalit, published in 2019, and Sujata Gitla's Ants Among Elephants in 2017. These are the two major memoirs written in English by women, especially. So I am showing interest in this since 2015, when Delhi University had organized an international conference. It was supported by France and England, where I presented a paper on Dalit feminism. And since then, I'm showing interest in this field, and I'm documenting something. And here in Canada, I'm working on Dalit literary cultures, especially Kannada Dalit literary culture. So I'm taking this history back to like 1,000 years before, maybe more. So here in my department, I am from the English and Film Studies department, and I don't think anyone has worked on Dalit writings here in my department. And in Canada itself, there are hardly a few researchers who have worked on Dalit issues. That's one of the reasons why I came here. So I have covered now this publishing pattern and the kind of Dalit writings picked up by publishers. And publishers, they have commercial interests, especially commercial publishers have commercial interests, and they go by trend. What kind of texts are taught in universities, especially because Oxford University Press publishes more for academic purposes than for general interest, whereas Penguin and Harper kind of publishers publish books for commercial purposes and which are also used for academic purposes. Mostly in English Studies department, though in the recent times, social sciences and other streams also make use of these texts for different purposes, for treating like social exclusion and marginalization and so on. And a new book has come out from the US by a major journalist now. It is a talk of the world now, not talk of the town, talk of the world. She is a Black author, and so it has grown this big. So I mentioned Navayana as one of the earliest, in fact, the earliest publisher to show interest in Dalit writings exclusively. So Navayana started off in 2003 or something. It was earlier based in Chennai and Puducherry. Ravi Kumar, a Dalit writer from Tamil Nadu, and yes, Anand, who was a journalist, they started this off. And they started with small publications like which are sold for 40 rupees, 80 rupees. And now they have become so big, though they are very independent, have minimum publications in a year, like not more than 5 or 10. So I asked a question in the beginning, why Dalit writings? So my answer was personally is political. And was that the only reason? Are there different reasons to it? So this was an untouched area for a long time, like the way untouchables are treated in India. So this was treated like social scientists from India and also from different parts of the world. They had shown interest in untouchables, who were earlier called as untouchables, and depressed classes during pre-independence era. And since Dalit Panthers came into existence, so the Dalit word is used largely in this discourse. So if you notice something, it is always the English Studies departments which come up with this, like because as a graduate in English literature, I can say that these English departments start only Canadian literature, Caribbean literature, American and British, which are which are also called as Commonwealth, Australian, and but not anything from India. And those writings, like what Akinarayan, Mulk Rajanand, and who else? Raja Rao, the triumvirate in English literature. It is called as Indian writings in English. It is not. It was not called as English literature per se. So it was this, and they were looking for something new, something fresh that has relevance to it. Relevance in the sense which addresses the social issues. Like feminism was one thing, When it was started in the West, and it was picked up by the English studies departments in India, and then Dalit studies. So this studies phenomenon is a recent phenomenon. Like in the world, it doesn't have more than 50 to 60 years of history. In India, it is even lesser. So in the 21st century, it is even like all like interdisciplinary areas of research are called as studies. They come up with this Dalit, like Dalit studies and feminist studies. They call it as studies. So Namayana published works, smaller works, and one such publication, if I can mention, is Touchable Tales, Publishing and Reading Literature. So this was, you can say, one of the major works in Dalit writings. And later they started publishing writings of Ambedkar. One of the major publications is Annihilation of Caste, which was an annotated version, and it had a bigger introduction than the book itself. And then many other writers like Anand Teltumde, who has been arrested now, he started publishing with Navayana. One of his works is The Persistence of Caste. They are writers like Anand Teltumde are social scientists. They are not Dalit writers, Dalit creative writers, to be specific. And Navayana has explored a lot. Though they are a small independent publisher, they have explored a lot in the field of Dalit studies with regards to titles and areas. Like, so they deal with humanities, social sciences, and natural sciences, something like that. And now environmental studies is also engaging Dalit studies, which is a new phenomenon. And within Dalit studies, like I mentioned, commercial publishers, they have commercial interests. And so they see if the books they have published are selling well or not. That is the only criteria they have. And as a commissioning editor myself, who had commissioned works for English translation, that was what I would look for. What would sell well? So that assumes importance, because if Dalit writings don't sell well, then these many publishers wouldn't have shown interest in Dalit writings. So this commercial interest is something to be noted. I say this because if they are selling well, the demand is there. So the demand and supply is something to be observed here. And so they both are complementary to each other. And since all these streams of knowledge are showing interest in Dalit studies, and there is a huge demand for Dalit writings, so they are publishing more and more. And they have moved from autobiography, memoir, to different kinds of writing, creative writings to different kinds of writings. And one work, which if I can mention, because I have written about it in Kannada, it is The Philosophies of Gramsci and Ambedkar, written by Cosimo Zine. which is a major work in this field, but um, it was written in English. It's not a translation. So this is to be noted. So Navayana was there, and then Zuban came into picture, and Zuban has published more works in the field of Dalit feminism, which itself is a separate area of studies. Because Dalits studies was dominated by men, so they wanted representation of women, because women's studies also engage in Dalit writings to a great extent. That was the reason. So Navayana and then Zuban, Oxford University Press, and then Penguin, Harper, Hatchet, they all started publishing one by one. And like I mentioned, Oxford University Press had published 3 volumes, anthologies on Dalit writings, creative writings. And Harper and Penguin had published one each, and Navayana one. So you will see at least 7 to 8, almost 10 anthologies of Dalit writings in English. And they're all translations, that has to be noted. So now in these 30 years, these many publishers, they have published so much of Dalit writings. And what would the researchers do with this? That is an important question to be asked now, because these days this technology has grown to such an extent, and digital studies has come into vogue. It is in vogue, and artificial intelligence and so many other things are there. So what do we do with these writings? That's important. So that's one of the reasons why I prefer to talk about this. We need to make use of this data in the sense English studies departments should make use of the data, like how many works have been published in different languages, for example, Kannada. How many Dalit works have been translated into English and different languages? That should be the area of concern. And what are the themes explored, and what needs to be explored more? And so there are different aspects to that. So I will take up any question related to this research from the research point of view during Q&A session. So this is something I wanted to talk about, 30 years of Dalit writings. And I have touched upon various aspects of it. And I want to respond to questions more. So that's the reason why I have not touched many things. So I want to close my talk here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Shishkumar, for delivering a talk and raising some pertinent issues related to the translation and publication in English studies writings. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the talk. And we have, the session is open for question and answer session. If you have any questions, you can post them in the chat box, both in English and Kannada. And sir, we can take up some question. Do you want to read out to yourself, or do you want me to read out? Shashi sir.
Yeah.
Shall I read
Yes,
out
please.
Shall I read out the question?
Yeah, please.
Okay, fine.
Please.
Yes, sir. First question. Jemsi Clarice Alex, she has posted one question. How do you see writings on Dalit lives by non-Dalit writers, especially in the context of translating Dalit writings in regional languages to English, where the translator is a non-Dalit? So that's the question.
Yes. Yeah, that's an important question. I didn't um, touch on this because, like I said, I wanted to listen to researchers, young researchers. Um, Dalit, about Dalit life, it was non-Dalits who showed interest in Dalit lives first. For example, in Kannada, you will see that Chomana Dudi, written by Shivram Karant, it is called as one of the earliest novel on Dalit life, and even Mulk Raj Anand's Untouchable, for example, it's a novel on Dalit life written by a non-Dalit, and even the widely discussed God of Small Things by Arundhati Rai is also by a non-Dalit, and so many works like this. So, why do non-Dalits show interest in Dalit works? It's because, uh, like I said, the trend is changing now. The younger writers, they are preferring English for any other Indian language. But earlier it wasn't the case, and majority of the Dalit writers, they would write only in Indian languages, and they had no competency in English. And even today, it is only the non-Dalits who translate these texts, because in among Dalits, there are lesser number of translators who could translate from Indian languages to English. That's one of the reasons. And also, this is only one of the reasons, but there are different aspects to it. Like non-Dalits are in the prime locations within academia across the world. Um, so they are in this, they have this power. Like if someone from Columbia University wants to translate a text in Kannada, they can easily approach. They are trusted more. And if someone from Karnataka, especially a Dalit, if a Dalit wants to translate a Dalit text, it wouldn't be appreciated much. And this is also a kind of tendency you can see among Dalit writers. But like I mentioned, my friend Yogesh Maitreya, he translates from Marathi into English. So I have also translated some, and I am still translating. So the trend is changing, but largely, yes, it is non-Dalits who have showed interest in Dalit writings because of their competency and because of their power within academia, and also might be, to some extent, might be out of guilt. Thank you.
Yeah, we will move on to the next question. It's by yes, sir. We will go to the next question. It's by one of my colleagues from the Department of English, Basuraj Donor, and I'll just read out what he has sent. The Department of English, Central University of Karnataka, offers a course on Dalit and tribal literature at the PG level, and a lot of Dalit texts are taught in different courses, both at PG and UG levels. So, two questions
Okay.
he has posted here. Don't you think that Dalit studies is no more an area of research for a few, It has rather become a separate discipline for many. And the second question is, don't you think that it is not merely a study of Dalits, it is also a study of the marginal sections of all sorts and kinds across the globe? So, yeah, you can respond, sir.
Yeah, I didn't define the term Dalit for this reason. So Dalit is now has grown big, and it includes so many people from different walks of life, mostly the marginalized sections. And it still needs to be discussed, and we don't have a seminal essay on the concept of Dalit. For example, if I can give you a reference, like a 50-page essay on the case of blackness by Fred Martin, we don't see anything like that in about Dalits. The caseness of Dalits, something like that. So it hasn't been defined yet. So till date, Dalits would comprise only those who are born as Dalits, who have identified themselves as Dalits. So that's the reason. And now we may have to redefine it. What do we mean by Dalits to make it more inclusive? And I also said that within Dalit, uh, we have this Dalit feminism. So there are different aspects to it. So, as the diaspora is Dalit diaspora is growing big, we will come up with different issues like race and caste has become a big thing now. So these you can see the intersectionalities. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have next question by Soumya Nayak. Our question is, are the commercial Dalit narrative different from the academic Dalit narrative? I don't know, you can.
I don't call it as commercial narratives because the narratives are not commercial. The narratives have been published by commercial publishers. So that's a correct way of putting it. So then there is no difference. But if I can share some examples, academic publishers like Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, and Sage, they have different purposes. Like they have a detailed critical introduction to each of their texts, be it creative writing or non-creative. They have a detailed critical introduction, but commercial publishers, they usually do not want to have it. They want to get into the text directly. This is something you can notice.
Fine, sir. We have one more question by Priyadarshini Morengetam Chanu. Our question is, how far can a non-Dalit translator remain true to the true to the text?
Ethics, this is called as ethics of translation. Ethics is something hasn't been explored much in India. It's a very big thing in the West, especially in the Western philosophy. So the ethics of translation, it is how true one is. It's a question to be debated because even if a Dalit translates a Dalit text, how true he or she is, that depends on the individuals and not on where he or she is coming from and their orientation and their commitment. Because some of the best known Dalit works have been translated by non Dalits.
Yes, sir. So this question is also my question. I mean, the next question that I'm going to read out is also my question. So it's by Meenakshi Kandimat. Our question is what are the consequences of translation of Dalit writings at the world level? So it is also your question, sir, and you started the session with the same question. Why did the creative
Yeah.
writers in any regional languages wish to translate their works to English? So what is the purpose or what is the exact consequences of translating Dalit texts into any other world languages? So yeah, you can respond it, sir.
Yeah. So in one of the conferences I attended, which I mentioned in 2015, organized by organized by Delhi University Center for Dalit Studies, um, a Tamil Dalit writer, his name is Shodharman. He raised a question like, "Why do you call me a Dalit writer?" Because I have in my novels, in my works, I have characters from all castes and communities. So why do you call me a Dalit writer? Why don't you call a Brahmin writer as a Brahmin writer? Hmm? So this is something that we still need to discuss. This is something, and why a text like what importance these Marathi Dalit autobiographies have on like at the global level, the impact of these writings at the global level. I have mentioned many times about the intersectionality. So this is caste, race, gender, sexuality, they all meet at various points. And now, for example, I'm working on even Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, one of the major philosophers in the world. She had delivered a lecture on Dubais and Ambedkar. Dubais, as you know, one of the major thinkers in from the African American community. And why would he be compared with Ambedkar? Hmm? This is something. And Gramsci, Italian Marxist intellectual Gramsci with Ambedkar. And there are many thinkers like this who are often compared with Ambedkar now. And yeah, as far as creative writings are concerned, there is something, a commonality between caste and race. Like I mentioned, the latest work by an African American journalist on caste. The title of the book itself is Caste. Um, so we need to think about this. I'm writing a review of this book for Samajamukhi. Those who are interested, you can read to explore more.
Sir, we have with us Professor H.S. Shuprakash.
Yes.
Yeah, sir, Shuprakash sir, if you have any question or comment, or you can also give your suggestion.
I'm sorry I joined late, so I didn't hear the lecture part of it. I've been listening only to the question and answers. Um, right now, I just have one question. Uh, though we are able to read the literatures in different Indian languages, and the characters are different in the sense that the Tamil Dalit literature has a different character than, say, Marathi Dalit literature, Gujarati Dalit literature. And for example, when I was editing Indian literature, I published special issues on Dalit literature of different languages. I discovered that Telugu is different, Tamil is different, and Gujarati is different. Uh, the variety that exists within the literature, I think that has not been talked about much. And one more question that I have in mind is question I'm asking myself: what does one do with uh, pre-modern writings, literary expressions, which are distinctly Dalit insensibility? For example, some of the Dalit Vachana poets in Kannada and Dalit saint composers in Marathi and other languages. And how does one theorize about these varieties of the literatures, and how does one theorize about the qualitative difference between? I'm sure there's a qualitative difference between pre-modern Dalit expressions and modern Dalit expressions. And just one more thing I have to have in mind is that the literature, when it began first in our languages, it rejected the tradition completely. Siddhalinga has poems in Kannada and Namdev Dasar's poems in Marathi and so on. I can give many examples, Daya Pawar and so on, except some kind of space for Buddhism. And But the more recent Dalit writing in Kannada and other languages is looking back at the Dalit traditions themselves. I mean, I would say that even the spiritual traditions. And this is another important development in the expression of Dalit sensibility. So these are some of the stray thoughts that are coming into my mind, and I'd be very happy if Shishi Kumar can respond to these thoughts.
Yeah, pre-modern, I don't want to call them writers. Pre-modern poets, you can say, and if it when it comes to vachanakaras, you cannot even use the word poet because it's very difficult. Shiv Prakash knows it better, and so these people from marginalized communities, and I am not calling them as Dalit because that discourse did not exist. But now we have to name them as Dalits because we have a discourse now. So this is the kind of duality we have. Um, so we, for example, I said that I am working on Kannada Dalit literary cultures. So I'm pushing the boundary back to 10th century or even like 8th century or 5th century, something like that. If I visit some inscriptions, I might find out something else. Whether to call them as Dalits or not, that's a very big question. And also to call it as writings, I don't know, because um, majority of the Dalit writers, they don't have any readers or audience in mind while writing. That is something to be noted because in the conference I attended, this was the question asked by a girl. She is doing her research in the UK. Her surname suggested that she is a Brahmin. And she asked this question to Chodharman that, who is your target reader? He had no answer. So because this is not Chetan Bhagat who is writing, who has audience, who has readership. So these Dalit writers, they just want to share their experiences with a larger community. So that's it. So this is, we still need to explore this pre-modern literature writings yet. Then we can probably answer this question. Whether to call them as Dalits or Sharanas, for example. Can Sharana be an appropriate term for Dalits because majority of the Vachanakaras are from marginalized communities? I don't know. We still need to explore that.
I have just one more question that's coming to my mind. My colleague, Professor Alone, has recently been talking about what he calls protected ignorance in Indian tradition, which will enable the dominant caste to keep Dalits ignorant. And as an extension of this, he has produced a critique of Indian modernity and modernism from Dalit angle. And I think when Dalit literature came in the 80s, early 90s, and later, around the same time, the feminist voices started emerging. And in a very profound way, there were critiques of modernism in our languages, literary modernisms. But this disjunction between modernism and Dalit feminist turn, to the best of my knowledge, has not been properly addressed. And Shashi Kumar, what do you think about this? Because we're trying to produce a kind of genealogy of Dalit writings in the last few decades, several decades. This is a very important question. The departure from modernism in Dalit writings.
Shashi sir. Shashi sir, can you respond? Sir, sir, we are facing, I think, network issue. Shashi sir is facing the network issue. We'll respond to you, sir.
I think it, yeah.
We'll rejoin. Shashi sir. Sir, I think he is facing the network problem. Shashi sir. No, sir.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, my PC ran into a problem.
Yeah, yeah, okay. It's fine. Professor Shivprakash asked one question. I think
Yeah.
you didn't. Did you listen to it, sir?
A part of it.
Sir, Shivprakash sir, would you like to repeat it?
Yeah, I'd just like to repeat it more
Yeah.
briefly. The
Yes, sir.
Dalit and feminist turn in the 80s in Indian literatures marked a distinct departure from literary modernisms. In the field of art history, my colleague Alone has produced a critique of modernity and modern Indian art from the Dalit angle. But a similar, investigation has not been done in the area of literature, though the actual departure from modernism in what can be called Indian postmodernism, I'm using this word very cautiously because we don't have that kind of postmodernism in India. What happened after modernism, this new thing into Indian literature, new sensibility was brought in by Dalit and feminist turn, but our literary criticism has not, literary history has not addressed this question. And just want to share this with Shashikumar, and I'm keen to have his response to this thought.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. And we have moved now to this neoliberal economy and what kind of effect it has on literatures. It's more Marxist than anything. But within this neoliberal economic structure across the world, how does this caste and race operate? So these would be different kind of questions now we can ask,
Yeah, I
because
agree.
we have moved from modernism and postmodernism, and like you said, the postmodernism didn't exist in Indian languages at all. I don't see that much, at least.
Yeah, I,
Um,
yeah, I see this. I understand what you said, because these are the main concerns today. How to safeguard these things from the dangers of neoliberalism and globalization. But I think it's also important to understand that the character of Indian literary expressions change because of this turn, uh, but this has not been properly explored. I think somebody should explore it, I think. Anyway, thank you
yeah,
very much.
if we can see our creative writings, Dalit creative writings,
Yes.
they have not shown any interest towards this capitalistic structure.
Uh
Um, for example. And also, majority of the fiction that I have read, they
huh.
focus on villages, not on cities.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Excluding Manjunath, for example, Manjunath VK, he is probably the only writer, and also Carpenter, for example.
Uh
They are focusing on city life,
huh.
and I think this would be more exciting than focusing on villages,
Yes.
because
For,
village,
for
yeah,
example, Namdev Dasar is a city poet, basically. Namdev Dasar
yes,
and Daya
yes,
Pawar, they've all
yes,
talked only about city experiences, the exploits in
yes.
cities. Yes, I agree with you.
Marathi has explored these, and also Telugu Dalit writing has explored
Uh huh.
this, but in Kannada, I don't see much.
Uh huh. In Tamil also, I think Shivagami and there's another writer, Imayam, etc.
Shivakami, yeah,
Imayam
yeah.
have contended with
Shivagami,
and
yeah.
the urban realities. Anyway, thank
Meena
you.
Kandasamy, for example.
Meena Kansami is a very unique writer,
Yes.
and for example, people talk so much about the way Arundhati Roy plays with language, but Meena Kansami, I think she's very important because she brought in a whole new kind of usage in English, which no caste Hindu English poet was ever able to do, because of her both a very sharp Dalit and also feminist sensibility, which is a very unique
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you. I just wanted to share this. I'm sorry I
Yes.
missed the first part of your lecture, but maybe I'll catch up with that. At least we will put it on the YouTube. I'm so sorry about it, and thank you for your responses.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. We have one last question from Dawar from IFLU. Sir, do you find any differences between Dalit translation and non-Dalit translation? So I think it was asked by somebody else. You can respond to it, sir.
Yeah.
Do you find any differences between Dalit translation and non-Dalit translation?
Sorry?
Sir, I think you have already addressed that question. We will skip it. And now we have reached the final of this particular 3-day international webinar. translation and exploring dialogues across the disciplines. So it's my duty to offer a vote of thanks to the teacher. Firstly, I would like to thank Professor H.M. Maishwar, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Central Institute of Technology, for allowing us to hold this 3 days international conference. Thank you very much, sir. Thanks to
Thank you.
Professor G.R. Nayak, Pro Vice Chancellor, Central Institute of Karnataka, Professor Mushtaq Ahmad I. Patil, Registrar of Central Institute of Karnataka, who encouraged us to hold this particular conference. My thanks to again the scholars who joined from different countries, especially Professor Sundar Sarukai, Professor Prakash, Professor Vanamala Vishwanatha, Dr. Rosie and Dr. Isru, Dr. Jelle Hoters, and even Dr. Shashi Kumar sir for delivering such a nice talk all these 3 days. Thank you one and all for making this a huge success. My thanks to the organizing committee, especially Dr. Vijay sir, who is the coordinator of Prasaranga, and his team, Dr. P. Kumar Mangalam, Dr. Abini, Dr. Kiran Gajnur, and Ms. Deepthi for making this 3 days international webinar, youth. And last but not the least, my thanks to all the participants who